The dryers downstairs never really stop. They just transition from a roar to a hum, a rhythmic thumping that vibrates through the legs of my bed and into my very marrow. I ate ramen noodles for dinner 212 nights in a row. Not because I liked the salty MSG-laden broth or the limp noodles that stuck to the roof of my mouth, but because they cost exactly 39 cents a pack at the Dollar General on Chapman Highway. That 39 cents was the thin, frayed line between eating and starving when you made $16 an hour and handed half of it over to a woman who had successfully convinced a judge that you were a danger to your own legacy. I know the exact number of nights because I kept a calendar on the wall of my rented room above the Hernandez family laundromat in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was one of those free calendars you get from the auto parts store, the kind with glossy pictures of classic cars that mocked my current lack of mobility. January was a 1967 Corvette, its chrome shining under the fluorescent light of my single bulb, and I put a heavy black ink axe through every single day, like a prisoner counting down a sentence in a hole he didn't dig. The vibration of the commercial dryers below rattled the glass of water on my nightstand all night, every night, for an entire year. My name is Marshall Dalton. I was 37 years old, sleeping on a stained mattress on the floor of a room that smelled eternally of lavender fabric softener and creeping mildew. I was working as a technician for a company I used to compete against, and I hadn't seen my children, Shepard and Wren, in 19 days, because my ex-wife kept cancelling my weekends with excuses that got thinner and more transparent with every passing text message. Shep was 9, Wren was 6. Their faces were my phone wallpaper, and on the darkest nights, that glowing screen was the only light in my world. 11 months earlier, I had owned a house, a company, a savings account with $62,000 in it, and a marriage that I thought was difficult but survivable. I had all of it, and then I had none of it. The distance between everything and nothing turned out to be one sentence from my wife's mouth and my signature on a piece of paper. Sign the papers, or I'll make sure you never see your kids again. I signed. But before I tell you what happened after that signature dried, before I tell you about the knock on my door that changed the trajectory of my life, I need to tell you about my grandfather, Amos Dalton. This story doesn't start in a room above a laundromat. It starts in the dark, suffocating belly of a coal mine in Harlan County, Kentucky, 60 years ago. Amos Dalton was a man who spent his whole life underground and somehow saw further than anyone I've ever known. He was born in 1925 in a hollow where the mountains close in so tight you have to look straight up just to see the sun for 4 hours a day. His father was a miner, his grandfather was a miner, and the cycle of coal and dust was the only inheritance he expected. Amos went into the mines at 16, a boy with a man's burden. By 25, he was a crew foreman. By 40, he was running operations at the Eastover Mining Company's No. 6 shaft, the deepest and most dangerous seam in the county. He worked underground for nearly 50 years, breathing in the very earth that tried to bury him every shift. He retired in 1990 with black lung, a knee that popped like a dry twig, and a pension that paid a meager $1,100 a month. He lived in a small clapboard house on 40 acres of rugged hillside, drove a 1978 Ford pickup held together by baling wire and sheer stubbornness, and wore the same Carhartt jacket until the lining disintegrated. Everyone in Harlan County thought Amos was a poor man who'd worked himself to death for nothing. They were wrong. My father, Ray Dalton, was Amos's only child, and he was everything Amos wasn't. Loud, reckless, and eventually gone. Ray left when I was 4, driving to Florida for cigarettes and never looking back. Amos never spoke his name again, but he didn't let that poison seep into me. Every summer from the time I was 6 until I was 16, I lived on that hillside with Amos. He taught me how to wire a circuit, how to sweat a copper pipe, and how to read a man's character by his hands. A man's hands tell his story, he'd say, holding up his own scarred, coal-darkened palms. You can lie with your mouth, Marshall, but you can't lie with your hands. I built my HVAC company, Dalton Climate Solutions, on that philosophy. By 2023, I had 4 trucks and a solid reputation. Then the thaw came, and the cracks in my marriage became chasms. Jolene wanted a life I couldn't build with just my hands. She wanted the status of the neighbors, the vacations in Cancun, the ease that comes with money you didn't have to bleed for. When I suggested counseling, she suggested I was the problem. I found out about Trent Kinsley, a man with a big truck and a bigger ego, because my son asked why Mr. Trent watched TV with Mom while I was at work. I didn't confront her immediately because I was afraid of the very thing she eventually did. On a Saturday in January, she laid out the manila folder. Divorce papers. She wanted the house, the savings, and the business I'd spent a decade building. If I didn't sign, she promised to tell the court I was an abusive, unstable man. She'd make sure my kids forgot my voice. I signed because I remembered being 4 years old and waiting for a father who never came home. I moved into the room above the laundromat. I worked for my rival, Dale Furman, for $16 an hour. I ate the ramen. I watched the calendar. I waited. Then, in February 2025, Harlan Creech, my grandfather's old attorney, knocked on my door. He looked like a man who had kept a secret for a century. He told me the estate was unsealed. Amos hadn't just been a miner. He was a silent tycoon of mineral rights. He'd spent decades buying up the rights to the earth beneath Harlan County, leasing them to the very companies he worked for. He had amassed $8.3 million, but he had sealed the will for 16 years to ensure my father couldn't touch it, and to ensure I became a man of my own making first. Most importantly, Amos had included a clawback provision. He knew the world. He knew that good men often get stripped of their dignity by those they trust. He had earmarked $500,000 specifically for legal fees to recover any assets I lost through coercion. The estate's legal team, led by the formidable Nadine Sherrill, took the case. We had the texts where Jolene threatened me. We had the proof of the fraudulent business appraisal she used. We had the evidence of her bad faith. In a courtroom on Gay Street, the walls came tumbling down for Jolene and Trent. The judge vacated the settlement. I got the house back. I got my company back. I got my children back. I drove to Harland last month and sat on Amos's porch, wearing his old jacket. The mountains were still there, silent and heavy. I realized then that love isn't just a feeling. It's a strategy. It's a man in 1990 looking at his grandson and deciding that the boy would never have to stay at rock bottom. Amos went into the dark so I could live in the light. My hands are still dirty from the HVAC shop, and my back still aches. But the name on the sign is mine, and my son is sorting bolts on the floor just like I used to. The legacy held. If you're in your laundromat year right now, keep your head up. Sometimes the help comes from the past, and sometimes it comes from the dirt, but it comes.